Johnson is one of the most talented people you will ever meet. Flat out. I don't care who you are, who you know. Alan is so good at so many things that I had to think about how I would introduce him. See? And so what I thought I would do is start off, because Alan isn't perfect, and there's some things that Alan isn't so good at. Now, if you know Alan Johnson, you know that if I screw up this part of it, he's going to come up here and correct me. But let me tell you a few things Alan isn't so good at. Alan is not a patient person. Some of you who know Alan are nodding their head, okay? And finally, by his own admission, and it's not easy to get Alan to admit a fault, Alan has told me several times he is not a football player. Alan is a PhD psychologist. Alan is an internationally acclaimed motivational speaker. Alan is an artist. Alan is a musician who plays numerous instruments, and if we're really kind to him tonight, we might get to see some of that. Alan is a former nightclub performer. Alan is a professional photographer. But Alan is with us tonight because Alan is a published author. And Alan just came out a wonderful fiction piece called The Awakening. And that's really what brought the LitFest committee's attention to Alan Johnson. We like all the other stuff, but Alan is a very gifted writer. And finally, I have to say, perhaps the most important feature of Alan Johnson is he's a good friend of mine.
Well, alright, okay, you win. I'm in love with you, alright, okay, you win. Baby, what can I do? Anything you want, I'll do, as long as it's me and you. Well, alright, okay, you win. I'm in love with you, alright, okay, you win. Baby, what can I do? I'll do anything you want, as long as it's you and me. Well, all that I am saying, all I want from you, just love me like I love you, and it won't be hard to do. Well, alright, okay, you win. I'm in love with you, alright, okay, you win. Baby, what can I do? Anything you want, I'll do, as long as it's me and you. Well, alright, okay, you win.
It took me 3 years to figure out that LOL does not mean lots of love. And you know, it changes things when you realize it means laughing out loud. I mean, the complexion of things really changes. My wife tries to keep me on the straight and narrow. So one day I said to her, honey, tell me, if I couldn't provide a living for you the way that you're accustomed, would you still love me? And she said, honey, of course I'd still love you. I'd miss you. But that community is principle-centered. And what does it mean to be principle-centered? When we grow up, we live a life that is based on our personal history, on our value system. And it may be that your parents taught you to be kind and loving, or they may have taught you to be wicked. But that's all values. And values tend to be something that is very subjective. Principles, on the other hand, are very objective. Principles tend to be true wherever you go. They're like natural laws. If I took this handkerchief and let go of it, what would happen? What natural law would it abide by? Gravity. There are also natural laws that are social, psychological laws that are true wherever you go. For me, those things are love and understanding and tolerance and forgiveness. Those are principles. The heartbeat is intriguing. It goes thump, 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 thump. And each thump provides a purpose. The first purpose is to feed the heart. And the second purpose is to feed the body. For those that are principle-centered, the same thing occurs. They have to feed themselves intellectually, spiritually. That's the first half of the heartbeat. But the second piece of the heartbeat is feeding the community, feeding the other folks. When one part of that heartbeat is missing, it's called a heart attack. And you're gone. So now, again, in thinking about characters in a book, one of the things that I ask myself when I am fleshing out these people is I'm asking, where are they at? Are they principle-centered or are they value-centered? And what does that look like? And is it possible that they will have an epiphany somewhere along in the pages of the book that will move them to being more principle-centered? And you dress with impeccably, your face is perfectly shined and clean. You maybe speak with a French accent because maybe it will be more attractive to them. A lot of pretense there at that stage. But it's a wonderful stage. It's full of anticipation. Diego was now 18 years old. It was harvest time. The boy worked alongside his father as always, marking the 8th working harvest of his young life. But this year was different. This year, Diego admired a beautiful, barefooted Moroccan girl thrashing the trees with a long stick to drop the fruit to the ground. He could see that the dark-skinned girl was conscientious, but mostly he was enchanted by her beauty. His preoccupation began to show in his work. "What are you looking at?" Francisco asked. "Do you see, Papa, how beautiful she is?" "Who?" "There," he pointed with the side of his head. The beautiful barefooted girl." "Ah, yes, I see. She is very beautiful. You have good taste in women. But she is Ahab and very dark. Does that concern you?" "No, of course not. Does that trouble you?" "Oh, not in the least. It is not the color of her skin that counts, but the state of her heart." "I agree. I am sure that she has a very good heart." "Oh, you may be right, my son. Oh, perhaps you should speak to her." But Diego was too timid to talk to the girl, so he admired her from a distance. But then, one day, the young beauty caught him staring at her, and she smiled. That was all the encouragement that Diego needed. At noon, when all the workers stopped for lunch, Diego whispered to his father, "I am going to talk to the girl." Francisco asked. You know very well what girl. She is only the most beautiful girl in all of Spain. Oh, that girl, Francisco chuckled. Wish me luck. Why, I do not think you will need luck. Not if you are polite, his father counseled. Yes, of course, Paco. Of course, Papa. I am not as smart as my brother, Paco, but I was not born yesterday either. I know that, my son. Go quickly before a less timid hombre steals her away when you are not looking. Diego's eyes widened. What? Oh, what do you mean by that? I'm teasing, Francisco. I'm teasing, Diego, Francisco said with a smile. Don't you know when I'm teasing? Now go. What happens next? I wonder. You'll have to read the book to find out. Second stage is chaos. You know, the problem is that pseudo-community can't last for very long. It's as if a marriage license becomes a license to criticize. You know, suddenly we want to take a moment out of our day to make that person a better person. We feel that is our responsibility. This is not a happy time. In organizations, it's the time of memo haven, when people are protecting their backside. You know, so you got to make sure that those memos are written correctly to make sure that you're covered. A lot of suspicion going on. Now, some people never get beyond this stage. You will see characters in my book who don't get beyond this particular stage of development. Diego is full of excitement because he has deeply fallen in love with the Moroccan girl, and in fact plans to get married. 2 weeks before the wedding, Francisco traveled from Granada to visit his father and brother in Espio. One evening after dinner, he and Diego walked to the town plaza. Francisco was wearing his priestly black cassock, which pleased Diego. He was proud to be seen by the villagers with his brother, the handsome young priest. Diego knew nothing of Francisco's secret resentments and passions. He thought of him only as a wise and compassionate older brother, someone to be trusted wholeheartedly. When they reached the fountain, Francisco laid his hand on his brother's shoulder and spoke to Diego in muted tones. You know, little brother, that you cannot marry this woman. Diego half laughed at the statement, thinking it was an awkward attempt at humor. But then he studied his brother's face and saw only a hardening of his eyes. What are you talking about? I can and I will marry her. Francisco took his brother's arm and pulled him down to the ledge that circled the base of the fountain. Yes, you can marry her, but if you do, it will be a sin against God and all that is holy. Diego stared at his brother, completely baffled by the harsh words. But why? Why would you say such an ugly thing? Because it is God's truth, and you know I am bound by my vows to speak only the truth. What truth are you talking about? She is Muslim. She is not Muslim, she is a Christian. Yes, that is what she claims, but her parents are Muslim, as are her grandparents and her great-grandparents before them. Her roots are Muslim. That is not something you can change with a perfunctory conversion to the Holy Church. Diego's eyes were brimming with tears. I have always loved you, Francisco. And I thought I knew you. But I have discovered tonight that I know nothing about you. Then know this. It is the blessed St. Paul who said to the Corinthians, "Be ye not unequally yoked with unbelievers. And what communion hath light with darkness? That is the truth. You must not copulate with this whore of darkness." Without thinking and without hesitation, Diego slapped his brother hard across the right side of his face. He stood trembling with fury and grief and turned to walk away. Francisco called out to him, "Christ has commanded us, whoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also." Diego circled back and squared up on his brother, who sat upright, offering the left side of his face as a target. "I will never speak to you again," Diego said. "You are dead to me." He turned his back on his brother, took 2 steps, froze for an instant, and turned to Francisco, who was still seated at the fountain ledge. "If you want my forgiveness, you have it," Francisco said. Diego was trembling. He slapped his brother so hard across his other cheek, the momentum of the blow sent Francisco to his hands and knees. To get from this stage to the 3rd stage requires a coming to Jesus. I mean, it requires an incredible change of spirit. It's called emptiness, but it could also be called fullness. The emptiness is the emptiness of ego, and the fullness is the fullness of spirit. This is a hard place to get to. To get to a place where you are empty of ego. It takes a great deal of work. And when you meet people that are living in this stage of community, you just want to be with them. I'm going to give you an example from my own life. One of the favorite people in my life was Ernie Dewater. Ernie Dewater was the Sunday school superintendent in the church that I attended when I was a boy. What was wonderful about Ernie is that even though he was probably the age that I am now when I was a boy, and Ernie always found time for me. He would get down at eye level and he would say, "Alan, how you doing? Tell me about yourself. And what about Susie? Are you sweet on her?" Sunday after Sunday, he would take time to get inside of me, and I loved him. When I first learned to play trumpet, Ernie was the first person I went to demonstrate that I could play a B-flat scale. Listen to this, Ernie. And Ernie would say, "The music of angels." Bless his heart. The years passed by, and my dear friend Ernie finally died. God bless him. And when I went to the funeral, I was really surprised because his daughter was there, and she said at the front door of the church, "Thank you for coming to this celebration." And when she said that, I said, "Yeah, that's right. That's exactly what it is." And the pastor spoke about Ernie, but he really didn't know Ernie. He was a new pastor. and I knew I had to get up. You see, when I was a boy, Ernie said, "You know, my favorite tune is Amazing Grace. Alan, when you can play Amazing Grace, would you play it for me?" "Yes, Ernie, I will." And I got to a place where I could play Amazing Grace, but for some reason I forgot to play it for Ernie. But I played it for him on that day when we were celebrating his life. So this is for Ernie, but it's also for the people that you know, including the characters in your books that you love, because they understand what it means to empty yourself of ego and fill yourself with spirit. This is much later in Diego's life. Diego is in his 70s at this point, and he has been introduced to an American whose name is Antonio. Actually, his name is Anthony, but when he connects with his Spanish family, they decide to call him Antonio. And they go to visit someone in a nursing home. Diego leaned over the man and kissed him on his forehead. "What do you think? Could you use some sunshine today, old man?" Diego wheeled the man to a window, but when the light fell on his face, he bellowed furiously and threw his arms over his eyes as if trying to block the punches of sunlight that jabbed at his head. Diego quickly returned the man to the grim flatness of the blank wall, and he was calm again. "I am sorry, old man," Diego said. "Maybe some other day." Diego pulled up a chair and sat beside the man, taking his hand in his. "Do you know me today?" The man said nothing. "I am Diego. Remember, Diego?" The man began to speak, but the words indecipherable to Antonio were dark and guttural, like a deaf mute trying to form an impossible sentence for the first time and arriving at expelling only gibberish. "What did he say?" Antonio asked. Diego leaned his ear to within an inch of the old man's mouth. Again, the pale man mumbled something nearly incomprehensible in the back of his throat. Diego repeated after him, "I stand for the Holy Crusade. I stand against the enemy of Christ. I stand with Franco, defender of the true Spain. Diego patted the old man's hand. Yes, yes, I know. Diego noticed that the blanket had broken loose from around the man's waist in his tussle with the sunshine, so he tucked the Afghan in again, protecting the man's legs from unseen malicious attack. There, that is better. Then, as if unsatisfied with Diego's mothering effort, the old man chopped his hand into the green blanket for good measure. Would you like a drink of water? On the table behind the old man was a glass of water and straw. Diego placed the end of the straw on the man's lips, who rejected the plastic tube with a vicious spit. Most of the saliva sprayed across Diego's face. Bueno, Diego said with a bent smile, wiping his face with his shirt sleeve. It was just an idea. I am not married to it. Again, Diego patted the man's hand. Diego looked for a long moment into the dead eyes of the old man, as if trying to find a remnant of someone he knew and loved from another time. Later, they leave the old man, and Diego and Antonio speak of him. Antonio asks, who was that man? One who has suffered greatly. How did he suffer? He was a man who sided with Franco and the rebels. 1 year into the war, he was captured by Republican troops. He was imprisoned in total darkness for 2 years. His knees were shattered with a sledgehammer. And yet he was loyal to the end. Rather than divulge the names of nationalist compatriots, he chewed off his own tongue. Antonio winced in horror. My God. I learned that he was being held in the castle of Montjuic in Barcelona. It was not easy, but I made my way to the prison in 1939. I begged for his release. It was granted. After all, he had broken knees and a mutilated tongue. What havoc could the man wreak on a lost Republican cause? What did you do with him? I brought him back to Andalusia in a mule-drawn cart. What became of him after the war? He served the Catholic Church, mostly as a bookkeeper and librarian. Was he a priest? Yes. I can tell that you loved him very much. That has not always been easy. I rarely agreed with him. He can be, well, inflexible. But he has suffered, as we all have suffered, and he deserves release. Diego paused as if rehearsing his next sentence. Yes, I do love him. What is his name? Francisco Garcia. He is my brother. Here's where true community is. You recognize true community because it sounds like the age of Aquarius. It's full of love and forgiveness and understanding and peace. The wonderful thing about being at community is you can solve almost any problem. If you are at true community, problem solving is a piece of cake, because you know you can offer all kinds of solutions and know that you're not going to be judged for it. When a couple or a team or a community is at a place of true community, all the pretenses go away. We are at a place where we can say, this is who I am. You can be transparent yourself. This is who I am. You can be empathic towards the other person, non-judgmental towards the other person, and a world-class listener. It's a great place to be. Sarah Lee. It may be that an entire novel, except for maybe the last chapter, is spent in stage 1 during a honeymoon. It could be that a novel is stuck at stage 2. All I'm saying is that as a writer, you need to be aware that we have at our disposal much more than we might originally think. That our relationship with other people can grow much more than when we think. One way I like to explain it is that at the base of our skull is the medulla oblongata, which looks very much like the brain of a tiger. And in fact, it controls our instincts. And so, you know, your fight or flight instincts comes from the very primitive part of your brain. But in the cerebral cortex, we have some gifts, some human endowments, which include awareness and conscience, imagination, and independent will. Those pieces are what help people evolve to a higher level of community, a higher level of spirituality, employing those gifts.
Heaven help the child who never had a home. Heaven help the girl who walks the street alone. Heaven help the roses when the bombs begin to fall. Heaven help us all. Heaven help the black man if he struggles one more day. Heaven help the white man if he turns his back away. Heaven help the people with their back against the wall. Heaven help us all. Heaven help us all. Help us all. Heaven help us all. Help us all. Heaven help us, Lord. Hear our call when we call. Heaven help us all. Oh, heaven help the boy who won't reach 21. Heaven help the man who gave that boy a gun. Heaven help the people with their back against the wall. Heaven help. Heaven help. Heaven help us all. Now I lay me down before I go to sleep. In this troubled world, I pray the Lord to keep a hatred from the mighty and the mighty from the small. Heaven help. Heaven help. Heaven help us all.